Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very sixth episode, the most sixth episode we've had.
Are we stealing that? Are we doing?
This episode is so six.
It is the number six.
So six.
This is the Trans Agenda. This is the show where we talk about gay stuff and our experience as people who exist in the world. I'm joined as usual by the lovely Distracted Elf.
That's me.
And we have a special guest.
You already know who I am, yeah. Andrew.
Yes. Andrew is down in that direction.
I'm special.
I don't know.
Yes. So Andrew, why don't you introduce yourself to the lovely audience we have today?
Well, hey everyone. I'm Andrew. My pronouns are they, them. And I am a game designer and Twitch roleplay person. And I don't know. That's the
I feel that. Yeah.
A queer person. Yeah.
All right. Yeah,
if you want to go into longer version.
Do that. I mean, yeah, hit us up with the longer version. I want to hear the juicy details about Andrew's existence.
Let's talk, I mean, we can talk about like why I am here.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
Question.
So like I identify as non-binary, and for those of you not familiar with that kind of stuff, it's a really big, broad, amorphous category that includes a lot of people, because it's kind of the none of the above option. It's the I don't know, it's the throwing up your hands and walking away from the test option.
Flipping the table option. Yeah.
In terms of like, you know, as a category, people in it are doing it for a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of like long-standing cultural traditions that fit into this. There are lots of kind of more modern and like kind of academically driven notions of like what it means. You know, there are like intersex people who sometimes identify this way. It's kind of a catch-all category. So for me to say like, cool, yeah, I'm non-binary, doesn't necessarily tell you much, except that in my case, like, it is definitely about a rejection of the whole framework of like binary gender. Basically, gender doesn't exist, it's all made up. Straight people don't exist, they're made up. It's all fucking arbitrary, and it's all used as ways for people to control. Like it's the small end of the wedge for patriarchal power, right? That's why the gender binary matters so much, and that's why it has been so strictly and brutally enforced historically. It's all part of imperial colonial power all around the world, and it fucking sucks. It's the worst. So I hate it. I'm done. I'm over it. I quit.
I mean, yeah, I think you it's succinct description of what was going on, and you said you quit, so I guess we're done.
No, that's the end of the show. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Yeah, you've heard a definition of non-binary stuff. It's done. It's over.
Yeah, let's just drop the mic and be on our way.
Yeah, what else could we talk about? But no, I totally get what you mean. I think it's really interesting that you're saying that, like, you know, it is the catch-all category. It is the category that like many different people fall into for many different reasons. I would assume that, you know, you've explained yours, so to speak, in that, like, that's why you consider yourself, you know, you're doing the thing. But like, it's like I sympathize with the idea that there's just like too much to explain, because it's the same with like trans femme people, right? Like and like trans people in general, where it's like it is a huge catch-all term. There are many smaller subdivisions of like what people consider to be the thing, you know, or the
so many ways to get there.
Exactly, yeah.
So many different stories, and like anything to do with identity. Like me being on the show, I'm not being like, I'm not here to represent this
Oh
like
no,
broad
no.
category of people. I'm only here to be like, this is me and my story, just as y'all are here to be like, cool, this is us, this is our story.
Yeah. I mean, I
so,
think
yeah, like I can't speak on the whole huge diversity and range of stuff that exists. I can point at it and be like, I don't know, you go look it up or something.
I think for me, one of the things that was kind of daunting when I was coming out and coming to terms with my own presentation and my own identity was just all of these options that were suddenly like thrown out in front of me. You could be a trans person, you could be genderqueer, or gender neutral, or agender,
right? Like,
or
as soon as you look behind the curtain, it's like, oh, this is all bullshit. So I can do anything.
The two bright shiny categories are like pushed forward, and they're like, these are the popular ones. Like, buy here, and
just buy this. Yeah,
there's so much else like that's possible. Yeah. I mean, the one thing that always catches me, right, with non-binary stuff is that like I personally am like tied up in that gender binary, right? Like,
yeah, like it matters for you in ways it doesn't.
Yeah, like my personal identity in terms of gender is like really important to me, and I like struggle to make it a thing, you know. So it's always interesting to hear the sort of like other side of it, sort of well,
so
not other side, but you know.
And please understand that I'm saying this with the like the utmost respect and support of you having that decision. But like, let's talk about how like people experiencing dysphoria and having the urge to like your desire to do that doesn't like it exists because we are told that there are only these two things, right? Like it is a symptom of this larger like societal problem of having a extremely narrow conception of what gender is permitted to be, and of the stuff that has to go along with it. Like we're told, okay, well, if you're born with these bits or whatever, like a doctor is going to tell you what your gender is, and then that's it. And there are two of them, and like full stop. Like I feel like, and certainly I mean this is true for me, and I'm curious if this resonates for y'all when I say it, but like, so like, yes, people experience dysphoria, and yes, it has to do with their bodies, but I wonder if that would ever happen in a world where we did not have this horrible oppressive gender thing, and that it would be enforced along the lines of bodies and all this kind of stuff, because gender is a separate thing from your body.
And I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from. And again, like this is not me being like, no, your opinion is wrong, you know, like, or whatever. Like,
and
that's
this
not,
is me asking a question too.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. But for me personally, right, like it isn't just about my presentation or my like what I'm allowed to do or society demands of me or any of that crap, right? Like that is important and like it matters to me, you know. And in my transition, those things have helped me, you know, in terms of like what is, you know, where I fit and my definition is. But that like physical things are really important too, you know, and that like biologically my body's fucked up, right? Like, but I think the fact.
I think I'm kind of in between you two, in the I feel that you could probably separate dysphoria out into like social dysphoria and physical dysphoria.
Yeah.
And Andrew's probably right that if we didn't have a socially constructed binary gender system, social dysphoria would probably go away. But
yeah, like
but
I'm
in that
as a
sense,
experiment, like how would this change? Because I don't. Yeah,
I think and I honestly think you're both right on that. Yeah.
But on the physical side of things, what you'd have is if you had someone who got to the age of 12 or 13 and started feeling physical dysphoria, there'd be no social problem with physical transition.
Yes.
Right,
I mean,
you because we
true.
don't have a system of gender, you can just be like, oh yeah, no, of course you can go on blockers, of course you can.
Oh yeah, you've got testosterone poisoning.
Yeah.
It's cool. We'll take care of that.
That's perfectly fine.
And so like in terms of my own experience, I think maybe there's an alternate reality, Andrew, where like they got to do some sort of like physical stuff. But I think like by the time I figured out my stuff, my situation, like that wasn't going to lead to good outcomes. So it's not something that I've pursued. And instead I am in this position of being just like a very cynical, grumpy queer, pulling a lot of back in my day shit. Not really though. But yeah, like I kind of find myself in a bit of a weird spot. And so, yeah, like I'm not super happy with a lot of aspects of my physical presentation and like stuff that my body decides to do. Like I really don't like growing facial hair. I really don't like, you know, like general like hair is kind of a thing.
I understand.
Yeah,
we got
and-
100% with you.
And so like yeah, like I have some levels of that in which I am like unhappy. I don't know if I experience like, I don't know, the like if I do experience dysphoria, the way that it affects me doesn't sound the same as what I hear like trans women, you know, expressing that kind of thing. And so it's, with all of this, I have always felt really uncertain about everything, and like I haven't had good language to express it and therefore understand it, that I haven't been like, at no point did I feel like I was properly equipped to navigate this stuff, or that I had good resources or good examples to look at on, you know, how to do it or what to do or what I could do. And so I'm kind of just like, I just like ended up here in a bit of a weird spot where I'm just like, I don't know, okay, I guess I'll just like be non-binary and shout at people.
I mean, I think that shouts back to the idea that you were saying before of like, well, I just fuck this test or whatever, you know, like
yeah, like I have a very irreverent fuck this shit attitude because of like when I came into my understanding of myself and the like details of it. Yeah, exactly. So it totally informs my attitude towards it and the choices I made.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's probably also an alternate universe, Ashley, where I ended up in a situation where I knew a lot more about non-binary identities and probably would have ended up, I don't want to say picking one of them, but ending up in that
like
space
that's where
instead
your
of
journey would have taken you.
yeah.
I mean, it's so hard, and there's all this.
Mm-hmm.
There's the discomfort of hindsight for all of us, I'm sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I just mostly try not to focus on alternate reality me.
Yeah, because like it's not gonna happen. So fuck it.
Focus on me.
And I'm not.
And the other thing is,
with my current circumstances either.
As much as there's probably an alternate reality me that like, again, the non-binary thing, I get it, I really do. But there's also an alternate reality me that's like cis male and hates themselves. So it's better just to think about me now.
Yeah. No. Exactly.
Good plan.
Yeah, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm trying to think of something to like ask specifically, but the vastness of the subject leaves me a little at odds, so to speak. Like, what was your experience sort of like coming out to yourself as non-binary, Andrew? Like, how did that happen? How did that happen? Like, I'm interested.
I mean, okay, so a lifelong discomfort and dissatisfaction with everything that I was told I needed to be in terms of like boy stuff and man stuff. Always feeling really uncomfortable in performing all of those behaviors.
Yeah.
Like there was like, if we have this idea of separating like physical dysphoria and like social dysphoria, then I had lots of social dysphoria where everything that I was being told about what was expected of me in my behavior didn't map to what like I felt like, and like the people I looked up to and were my like role models or aspirational things or people I respected, they were all women, mostly queer women. And so, yeah, like everything felt really impossible all the time and really like cruelly separated, and like all of the things that were being thrown at me just like didn't make sense to me. And so it for a long time was just like, oh well, I'm just like shy or socially awkward or whatever. But then like in hindsight now, I'm like, I'm not shy, I just like can't, there's like this role that I'm being asked to play that I can't play.
Yeah, you're just not interested in the fence that divides these things, right? Like,
and so yeah, like I gravitate towards a lot of behaviors and ways of being that would most like typically be ascribed to women in a like in our shitty society. So so that's kind of the like first step on getting here. And then yeah, like being incredibly fortunate to have had some friends who are trans, like fucking Avery, designer of Monster Hearts. I knew her before her transition. I knew her like during and around it, and she was good at promoting spaces for like queer people and role-playing game stuff. And I came in to support that, just being like, doop to do, yeah, okay, I'll go help out with that, and just being the whole like looking back, I'm just like, God, you're so gay, like figure it out.
Yeah.
Like everything
you're so queer. Yeah.
Was all of this stuff. And like in high school, I was friends with all the like queer lady like clique. I was in there.
Yeah.
Just like blindly like wanting all these things and understanding that I wanted those things, but not understanding why. Just having like this huge blind spot as to why.
Well, I mean, so, I think that's like societal stuff, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Blind spot as to why is because there's no resources to like tell you why that might be. Not really, you know.
Yeah, you're.
Sorry if I'm like jumping in here. Like,
no. Like it's an uphill thing to get to that stuff. Your momentum or inertia is going to carry you to something else. So, yeah. So like being fortunate to know some people who then kind of exposed me to this stuff, and then also my friend Emily, who I knew through bike polo, and her transition, I think was the thing that finally pushed me over the edge. Just like seeing more and more people doing it, and I guess like my partner Jillian, who is also non-binary, just like feeling like I had more and more permission.
Yeah,
to do this stuff, and that I could be allowed and allow myself to do it.
I totally understand the idea of that. Like, the visibility of that sort of stuff is like super important to like, people who are feeling repressed, you know, like and don't know
what
your
outlet is.
You have no idea where you want to go with it, basically.
This is not an accepted answer to my question if you were to ask like mainstream society. So yeah, it was the whole fucking stupid thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I can live in a way where I like feel a bunch of regret about not getting it sooner or whatever, but like, nah, I don't have time for that. I gotta exist and live and try to.
It's not worth it to wallow in shit. I've always found personally.
No, it serves no purpose.
Yeah.
It can tear you. It can like slowly rot you from the inside out. It's a bad place to be. So I'm just like, cool. Would have been nice to know earlier, but I didn't. So let's go. Let's do it.
I think there's an interesting point that like lots of people bring up when we're talking about like non-binary stuff, trans stuff, like this kind of issue, right? Where they're like, oh, but society is getting so much better at handling these things, and like there's so much. Look at the forms that have checkboxes that aren't, you know, male and female. Oh, great, you know.
But
like,
it's still not okay to tell kids
this
that they
is what,
might be-
yeah.
yeah, there's still this weird thing where we have to like
Mhm.
shelter children from the trans agenda.
Won't someone think of the children?
Yeah.
Right, there's this weird fucked up thing that like we're gonna pollute their minds and change them, and like no, because those people don't understand that both internally and externally there is so much pressure to not be
Mhm.
trans that no one would ever do it on accident. They just
But like,
like,
Yeah.
come on,
but
it's
like,
fucking absurd. No one would be like, you know
yeah.
what, I want to get beat up every day and like harassed on the street and have people like throw slurs at me and all this. That's what I want.
There's a lot of
It's not glamorous.
like there's a lot of shitty narrative like ascribed to it by society, right? Like there's and that,
oh god,
yeah, that exists, right? That is true. And like I'm glad that, and I hear from people like, yeah, it is getting better, or like it like obviously things are changing, and sweet deal. But people act like, and I'm happy for that, but people act like it's idyllic already. You know what I mean?
no, yeah.
Like it's some fucking masterpiece of society.
Generally, people like to look at these large social issues as if there's like a switch that
Like a switch,
flipped and then
right?
suddenly
Switches
it's okay.
over,
It's just
yeah.
not. So
I've legitimately been told, yeah, when I'm streaming on Twitch, on Twitter, in real life, that don't we have gay marriage already? Isn't that problem solved?
isn't
Yeah,
that
haven't we,
enough?
haven't we
Yeah.
already beaten the societal problems?
Yeah.
But like, sorry, I took it in like a tangent, considering we're talking about like specifically, you know, like
I mean, it's all relevant.
yeah, and I mean
certainly,
it is.
but
And I feel like the non-binary stuff has got like that same backseat feeling to the trans stuff had with the gay stuff. You know what I
exactly.
mean?
Yes, I
And-
think that's a
and
really
and that sucks, right? Like I hate that.
Yeah.
So a big part of the problem is like, what does a non-binary person look like? What does it mean to be out as such? And like,
Mhm.
there's this whole broader conversation around like the main barrier for like non-binary identities to get more traction is that, you know, people have to ask a lot more. There has to be a conversation, an ongoing rolling conversation in all interactions where people are like, cool, what are your pronouns? And like we have to decouple,
Mhm.
society has to decouple fucking presentation from gender
Yeah.
a little bit, and like be willing to ask those questions and not have stigmas around being like, oh, what if I call someone the wrong?
What if I get it wrong? Oh no.
That'll be the end of the world and everything will die and the patriarchal will fall apart. And I'm like, yes.
One
yes,
of the
it will.
things I've been
Destroy it.
One of the things I've been shouting about recently, I do a bunch of LGBT outreach in the sciences and with all my astronomy stuff. And I've been giving talks at universities and conferences and being like, it is just the simple thing of when you get your conference pass that says what university you're representing and what you're talking about, having even a write-in box where I can write my pronouns. And for me it's great, but for non-binary people that's like amazing that you can, the ability to do that.
It's pretty essential. Yeah. And yeah, it's on all the cis folks to do the work, like Adam's saying in chat.
That is definitely a point of it. Like,
and
the people who have no desire to change their ignorance are the people who have to do so.
And
Basically.
yeah, like I can't stress enough how much like patriarchal power is at the root of all of this, because the thing that matters most for patriarchal power is knowing who the in-group is and who the out-group is. And so it's all about being like, cool, okay, 50% of the population, women, you're already in the out-group, great. And then cool, within this like man category, there's this idea of like pruning and selecting out, where it's like gay people aren't men and trans people of any type aren't men. And, you know, so it's all about
I always found that
protecting the exclusivity of male power.
Yeah,
it's fucking horrifying.
I always found that particular point, the like trans people of any kind aren't man, like you can't have it both ways on that one.
Right, there's like a really fucked up thing that goes on where
it's really weird, like switch where it's like you're either, you know, even the people who are super ignorant, you know, and who are like, you know, if you're born a certain way, you're a certain way, or whatever, fucking, you know what I'm talking about.
That
right?
bullshit.
I can't even like spout it because it feels gross in my mouth. But like, even people who think that, right? The logic is that then you can't like it doesn't make
So,
sense. There's
I
like
know
two
the problem
categories.
here is that you're trying to assign logic to
It's not possible.
No, and that these divisions are super arbitrary, but it's about cutting as many people out of the in-group as possible to preserve the power of the in-group.
Yeah.
And to punish people for deviating from that structure upon which everything is built. Because as soon as we recognize that like it's all fucking made up, then people will be like, oh, it's all made up, so it doesn't matter. So like there's no reason why I should have to put up with this shit.
Yeah.
And like,
I think one thing I find really interesting is really how the acceptance of non-binary people is going to affect just cisgender men who have to deal with like toxic masculinity bullshit. It's gonna be so good for them once they realize that they don't have to do any of that.
I mean, hi, it's me trying to not be part of all of that stuff. And so like at work, I'm invisible and I get misgendered constantly because there is no culture of asking and no broader understanding of stuff. And like, I just don't even care to correct people. It's not worth the work. I'm not taking that on.
I mean, it's a lot of emotional labor, right? Like to do that shit. And
it's
to have that conversation 8,000 billion times. Like, ugh, I can't, you know, like.
And so, yeah, I lean on my invisibility a lot, and it is both very helpful and very like horrifying and isolating. To be that way, and I think a lot of non-binary people have that experience from what I've like seen from other people talking and whatnot on the internet, that yeah, you end up feeling like you're being silenced or pushed to the margins or are invisible, and no one acknowledges what you are. And so it gets me down a little bit, but mostly for me the idea of being seen is like a upswing thing. It feels really good when I am. Most of the time I just like, I've got a pretty thick skin about accepting that I'm not going to be seen most of the time. And so amongst friends like y'all who are able to do a good job of making me feel seen, it's just a very positive, nice experience. And I didn't think about this. My moment where this like notion got exposed for me was one of my coworkers, Leanne, who is like, she's this cool queer lady. She's dating a non-binary person. I've known her for a long time, and we were just like hanging out at work one day and the shop was quiet, and she just like looked at me dead in the face and was just like, huh, you must be like feel really invisible a lot of the time. And I was just like, I like, my heart just dropped. I just had this moment where not only did I feel really like seen and understood by her, but it also like equipped me with a way to understand that whole paradigm. Like this idea of invisibility wasn't really on my radar or in an articulated way until she like said that and we had this conversation. Yeah, and it was like a pretty incredible experience. But yeah, like just no one really like knows what to look for, and the defaults are always to categorize people first, not let them categorize themselves.
I mean, and I think that's the thing, right? Like the idea of like people labeling people before they have a chance to label themselves, you know, is like at the root of all of it, basically. Like if people cared what, you know, the people they were talking to or associating with wanted, then maybe it would all be easier. Right?
Yeah, and
but again, you're putting that expectation on people who have no concept of what that might
they don't have a horse in the race.
Yeah, because they're comfortable. They don't
they're
like,
they're fine.
Why move when I'm comfy here in my situation?
Here's my recommendation to all of any cis folks watching, or just everyone in general. If you don't know for sure, if you haven't asked someone their pronouns, just give them a generic they them. Get in that habit. This is something that like is a practice for us at my like bike shop that I work at, where we're like, cool, yeah, this customer who I don't know what their fucking name is, I've never had the pronouns conversation, etc. I'm just like, yeah, their bike is broken, they need blah blah blah, and to just default to that and get yourself used to it. And don't come at me with any like grammar, whatever, because it's all wrong. There's no
Language is made
there's
up.
no reason not to do this. Just do it. Also, even if it were grammatically incorrect, just it will become grammatically correct by us doing it. It will become part of language. So yes, just do that. And if you are a cisgendered person, bother to express what your pronouns are instead of letting people assume them, because it will peel back the curtain for everyone else to see more and more folks doing that. And so if you give a shit, do those things. Those will help immensely for everyone. Those will just help everyone. Those will help all of your trans friends of every type, because we can't assume that folks have like passing privilege or are invisible in that way, and we want to support them.
Well said. I could do
So yes, please, everyone, go do that.
Man. Yes. When you step out your door today, follow Andrew's advice.
Yeah, I think some advice on that line is sometimes it can be a bit awkward when you're first talking to someone, especially if they're cis and wanting to ask their pronouns. But one thing I've been trying to do is when I introduce myself, I say my name is Ashley, my pronouns are she, her.
Yeah.
And that prompts other people to do it as well.
And to even like know that that's a thing and to think about it at all. It is work.
Yeah.
I'm not like demanding that people do this, but like if you have the energy and the wherewithal and the confidence to do it, go do it. It's great.
I mean, it's basically fighting against the unconscious like caveman instinct in your brain, which is, like you said earlier, people look at people and they categorize them immediately. Yeah. That's an unconscious,
and that's something that we are trained to do because our society depends on it.
Yeah. If you couldn't do that 100,000 years ago, we would all have died.
Well, no, I don't even think that's true. I think like there's lots of evidence of cultures where, so like Luke was telling me about this, there's a culture where the two genders are the people who go out and harvest the rice and the people who make something with the rice. I can't remember what it is, but those are their genders. They don't.
But I was less trying to talk about gender, but just the general sense of your brain needs to be able to categorize. That's a lion. It's going to eat
things
me,
in
that's
general. Yes.
Yeah. That's an antelope. I can eat it.
And so something that our society trains us to always want to categorize and discern is the power associated with patriarchal whatever. So it's like, are you a man or are you a not man?
Yeah. So I'm just going to address this because it's turned into a conversation in chat while this has been going on. The people are talking about gendered languages. I can't talk to you about how you might refer to non-binary folk in another language because I don't do it personally. But what I will tell you is that you have a community in that language somewhere that will tell you how to do that. You know.
And if you meet someone, you can ask them.
And yeah, you can ask.
You could just ask them.
One of the things people always seem to get, like they trip up on, like cis folk trip up on, is that like we're not gonna bite your head off for asking, about pronouns. Like, in fact, we want you to.
No, trans people will never be offended if you ask.
There has never been in any interaction I have ever seen the whole like, did you just assume my gender?
Yeah.
Like joke thing. That's not real.
It's not real.
No, that's a shitty meme that actually damages our odds of success over here.
We would love if you would ask that kind of stuff. So just assume that on top of like what I'm saying, because I can pretty much guarantee that anybody reasonable is going to have the same answer, right? Like,
and in general, we should all aspire to a culture of asking rather than guessing in all behaviors.
Yeah.
Because like, let people tell you what they need. Don't assume stuff for them. And that can be like, that doesn't have to be about like gender and other high stakes stuff. That can be about really low stakes stuff as well. That can just be like, hey, like when you ask someone a favor, hey, can you do this for me? There's the implied thing where that's an order, or that's you're like telling them to do it in our way that we use language a lot of the time. most people, when they ask stuff, they're not genuinely asking stuff, and we kind of need to break that down a little bit, in my opinion. So encouraging a culture of asking rather than guessing is very nice.
Yes. Don't assume. Ask. Makes it way easier.
Yeah, people can tell you what their needs are, and then you can decide whether or not you are able to meet their needs and do things for them. It seems really simple, but
I mean,
it's not how people work in their day-to-day.
It is a super simple concept, but it is such an implementation, right? Like, it's a matter of beating back like a whole bunch of years of like societal expectation and like the way that people are trained to do things and stuff. It is a retraining.
Yeah.
It is.
There's a lot of that needs to go on for the world to accommodate. Well, I say accommodate. For the world to stop treating trans people like garbage, it needs to reorient itself, because by and large, the prevailing culture is a fucking blunt instrument.
Yeah.
And it's awful for a lot of people for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. All right. What else? Ash, you got anything?
Yeah, there was one thing I wanted to talk about, which Andrew, you kind of mentioned right at the start, is this idea that straight people don't exist.
Yeah.
And for me, like, where my brain sort of gets to this is thinking about people who traditionally identify as bisexual. Because for me, it's like, I identify as pan because I look at all the genders and I'm like, yeah, cool, no, sure, whatever, everyone's sexy. But I see people who identify as like traditional bisexual. They're attracted to men and they're attracted to women, and I'm like, are you like not thinking about anything in between that whatsoever?
So, I'm excited about the usage of bisexual where it is essentially interchangeable with pansexual.
Yeah, and that's the way I've seen it.
Yeah.
Any other definition of it, I think, is stupid and doesn't mean anything. And so, like, yeah, if someone wants to be like generally, in my experience, when people attach the word traditional to things, it directly translates
to be an asshole.
Asshole. Yes. So if it's like, I have traditional values, it's like, no, I have asshole values.
Asshole values.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I don't truck with any of that stuff. To my understanding, bisexual, pansexual, they mean the same thing. If you want to choose to make that distinction and emphasize something, cool. But if someone's like, oh, I'm bisexual, I'm like, cool, yeah. So you fuck everyone.
Yeah. Well. So one thing I've seen is people who are using bisexual and using that in the sense that I'm attracted to women and non-binary people on the femme end of the presentation, like spectrum.
What, like two things, like using the
well
yeah.
The difference I've seen is pansexual is everyone and bisexual is more than one.
This is why I just don't label it. This is exactly why.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like all of these terms. Again, like, this is another one of those things where like these exist to make arbitrary divisions that aren't necessary, and the only reason people feel the need to be like, I'm straight, is because it's a way of opting in to like the safety of the
in group. It's opting into the like societal in group.
Yeah, exactly. And so like it's not real. It's a club that people are signing themselves up for.
Yes.
And like, it doesn't need to exist except as a way to be like, and you're not. Like, I'm straight and you're not. Yeah. Because otherwise it would just be like, there's no other option.
Yeah, like, why do we care? Right? Guess what? Everybody likes the people that they like. That's weird, huh? Like,
so yeah, and like, for my part, in terms of my own sexuality, I'm just like, cool, yeah, stuff.
Cool, yes. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of like, if we were to map on a gender spectrum of like, if we just consider it to work that way, I am somewhere in the middle, like towards the femme side. There's like a 30% slice where I tend to operate, but it's not like a strict delineation. It's like a heat map. There's a heat map, and it's like, this is where I mostly have ended up. but there's some outliers and some people here and
Yeah.
there. And, I don't
I
know.
mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
I've
I
like
mean,
that's the thing. Like I honestly think, you know, to take a little turn, so to speak. I honestly think that the way that we classify these things and delineate these things and label these things is like it's not accurate. Like it is just random and general and
they're all super
like,
arbitrary and made
full
up.
of arbitrary made up meaning.
So
Which is why I just abstain.
the takeaway
But
here is that straight people don't exist.
straight people don't
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah. Okay.
They're not a real thing.
Yeah.
And therefore any other definition also doesn't
Mhm.
strictly
You
exist.
see, I agree with you, but I feel like in the society that we live in, I find labels to be an important part of my identity because I can use labels to build communities. And those communities being not the default. So even if your label is fuck all labels, you can still build a community around fuck all the labels and no one else exists. And I feel like that ability to be able to build a community around trans people or build a community around queer people is where the power of that comes from. You know, it's why it's important to have an LGBT category on Twitch is so that we can have that community space, because normally we get excluded from all the normal community stuff because that's where all the straight people are and they don't want us there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you in that regard. I think that when it comes to community and that kind of stuff, yeah, these categories can be important, right? But when ascribing them to yourself, that's the difference, right? Like at least for me, right?
Yeah,
and it's
like
basically the only one I basically don't ascribe to is the like what my sexuality is, you know. I'm definitely trans, you know, like that's a label, so forth. But anyway,
but yeah, like it's all a lot more floaty and there are always exceptions, and so like though we might want to like make these statements and those identities might be important to us, it's important to remember that like it's okay to not strictly adhere to.
yes.
And like anyone who says they're straight is full of shit. They're not. Or anyone who defines their sexuality or their identity really narrowly is picking and choosing and is like deleting and erasing parts of themselves.
Which is a shame for them, you know? Like that's the person I feel bad for doing that kind of thing. You know who you are and why make that not all of you rather than just some of you that you've decided is okay. That's, I don't know.
And like don't take this as me like calling out and shitting on straight people or something.
No.
I'm just like you know, this is like the same violence that gets leveled at me gets leveled at straight people in a different way. And so or just like all of the
I guess the thing to consider is
stuff.
If you consider yourself to be straight, you're intentionally missing out on all of the wonderful other genders you could be attracted to.
But if you're not, that's fine, right? Like attraction is attraction. Again, it's one of those things where it's like you will like the people you like. I have no further input on this. Like I bet there are people that fall within the like straight category in terms of what they like, but that they define themselves that way to be included in the in-group when there could be other things. That's a shame, you know.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like I've been told once before by someone who identified as straight that they just never met a non-binary person, and I'm like, well, why are you scratching that off then? I mean, like, be open to the idea at least.
Yeah, I mean
it's a matter of a binary, right? Like you're ascribing to a binary, and we're here to talk about non-binary things, and the non-binary thing is that don't ascribe to binaries. You know, like
it's important to remember that all of these ideas we have about everything, at some point we made them up.
Yeah, and 100%.
if you look at the body of scientific evidence that it does exist, limited though it is, and fraught with bias though it is, even still, it largely points to the idea that like mapping gender and sex, like that, like biological sex doesn't really exist in as clean cut a way as we thought.
Mhm.
That therefore, like as soon as you start picking away at like pulling these threads, the whole tapestry of bullshit starts to unravel a little bit. And so it is not as clean cut as we have been told by our society to think about things, and just be open to there being a little bit of wiggle room in all of these concepts. Like people are like losing their minds in chat right now.
We get it, guys.
Yeah.
We know
It's just like,
we know what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
get why you would have a problem with this
fucking
necessarily.
chill.
We're just like, it's a matter of separating the idea of these labels from that binary, right? Like that choosing one thing or another thing. That it doesn't have to be that way,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and that like this is something that like a lot of people every day continually make up for themselves and continue to propagate, but that it's not really like, it's all smoke and mirrors.
I
So
mean,
just,
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I don't know, figure out what works for you. If a
So-
label
so-
feels good, sure, use it, but
So
recognize that it does some damage too.
So here's the thing. Now that we've said this really, really controversial thing, apparently, because chat is like crazy, but now that we've said this really, really controversial thing, should we just like open it up? I feel like we're
Yeah.
about. it's
Yeah, I
about time.
feel we're
Ask the
about the
question.
right time.
Let's take some sweet fucking chat questions. Bring it on. Chat,
I mean,
ask us your questions.
all this to say that like my gender identity is part of like, is tied to political ideas that I have and like aesthetic ideas that I have. It has very little to do with like looking a certain way or who I fuck. And that is why we're getting into these controversial statements, because I have a bunch of very strong feelings about this stuff based on information that I have absorbed from the world.
Yeah. All right, chat. As soon as we ask for questions, everybody shuts up. Let's see what we got.
Okay, well, here's one that I don't know if I'll be able to answer, but maybe y'all will know. So this is maybe a silly question, but I don't understand, why are pronouns always stated pronoun / possessive, i.e. he, his, or they, them?
Because that's the
Theirs.
English language.
Because that's the way
And
English works.
It's just
Yeah, that's
strictly
the way English works.
I mean, I think it's totally fair to just be like, my pronouns are, I use they pronouns. I hear people say that a lot too. And anything that retains specificity like that is helpful. Some people sometimes are like, I'm a dude. And then you're like, cool, yeah, okay.
All right.
What
Dude.
linguistic component do I use for you though? So as long as you
Would
include one of them,
would
usually
you like it
parse
to
it out.
be he, him? I don't want to make that assumption for dude.
And if it's anything more complicated than just like him, then there's room to have like extra ones tacked on. So that's kind of why this practice has shaped out the way it has.
Totally.
Um,
What else? Did we have any other ones from before that I totally missed? Well,
Can we talk about Girl by Moonlight and how that relates to gender?
I think that's a whole other stream.
I mean,
mean,
we could talk about that for a while.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
But basically, the game encapsulates a bunch of my feelings about gender in some subtle ways and some not so subtle ways. It's a game that is, it's in my voice, so it includes my experience, whether I want it to or not, right? Like my bias is in there, and so a lot of the choices I made in design are there, and also there's a lot of more like secondary stuff that relates to gender things in there.
So Dave asked, so I'm attracted to X kinds of presentation is a preferable way or more accurate description of attraction. I mean, for me at least, that's how I tend to describe my like sexualities. I'm pan, but I have a preference for like femme presenting people. But I think that changes for different people. But also trying to like delineate presentation into like femme and masc and androgynous is another one.
And
of
I mean,
these
there can be all
labelings.
kinds of axes on which you want to define.
Yeah, we're building up a Dungeons and Dragons alignment grid of genders and presentations.
Because maybe for you it's really important
lawful
that
femme.
people have certain like bits, but like, so then maybe you're like, yeah, cool, I only want to like get down with people who have vaginas. And like, I guess that's a fair way. That is not usually, like, often presentation is the first thing that people look to, but then we get into delightful things like the gay panic defense and all this other shit, where people are attracted to someone, and then this like switch happens where it's like, oh, she's got a penis. Guess I need to like freak out now. Guess I'm like suddenly gay. Like, our society has some really regressive ideas around gender, like, full stop. I don't need to get fully into this, but yeah, there's some weirdness around saying like, I'm attracted to this kind of thing or this other kind of thing, at least tradition, like historically. Going forward, I think it's totally legit to just be like, yeah, I'm attracted to like people who present this way, or like people within this kind of like band of identities or whatever. Like, for me, when I described it, I was like, there's a heat map. It is mostly in the like femme space, kind of adjacent to or crossing over the middle, and it's mostly in there, but it like has a wider range that it touches, and is mostly concentrated in one place.
I'm a huge fan of like, when my sexuality is relevant, you will know if I ask you on a date.
Yeah, exactly. Like, when you will know I am attracted to your kind of people.
When you will know if I like you when I say I like you.
I think for me it's just butts.
Why would I take a drink of coffee? Come on. Perfect though.
I'm not sorry.
We're adequate, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Dirtbag Boyfriend has a really important question that is like a hill I will die on. So, in terms of the broader societal understanding of like what non-binary gender is and stuff, there is a societally acceptable like version of it, and it's that you're AFAB, white, dressed in androgynous clothes. Like, basically you're what's that actor from Twilight or any of these other what's her name? Kristen Stewart, yeah, like that kind of look.
How did I know that?
I don't know. You're a closet Twilight fan. Basically, there is like the fashionable kind of androgyny look, and that's where people's minds go. That's the like horrible standard that we're all expected to reach towards or whatever. And like that's just damage. Like, non-binary people don't have to look any fucking way.
There's this
fucking chill.
One thing that really fucks me off is when you get these huge clothing brands, like John Lewis in the UK did this like last year, and they said we've got a non-binary clothing line coming out, and it came out and it was just men's clothes with all the labels taken off.
Yeah, right.
In women's like sizes, and that was it.
And so yes, there is like non-binary, like people like me are meant to not exist, so that there can be this very fashionable, pretty, like, here's my read on what is going on there. So in our culture, aesthetics are centered on women, right? Like a woman's body is an aesthetic object in a way that a man's body is not. And I say object because yes, it is objectifying. And so when societally we're like, cool, so then like what's the prettiest non-binary person? We're like, cool, so it's got to be still a woman's body, and there's this fucked up erasure shit that happens where society is like still not really, like, you're not seen when you are in this mode, like this is a really gross thing. And so it's just being like, cool, yeah, so we'll take that, the prettiest body, and then we'll put some men's clothing on it and make it kind of androgynous, but also still kind of like femme and sexy. And it'll be like, cool, you got like some colorful hair and you're wearing like a tuxedo, and you got some boobs in there, but like subtle boobs. There's this whole gross fucking thing. It's really frustrating.
Yeah.
Because that, like, I'm never gonna look like that. There's no fucking way. It would have taken I would have had to get on this shit a lot earlier if I wanted to look like that. Let me tell you. So, and that this ties again to like, I keep harping on this, but like, fucking yeah, everything is defined by it. Like, because it's not going to be okay for them to show a man in a dress, because that is like a horrifying teardown of,
because it is like, yeah, it is like shitty masculine power like side of things where presenting in any femme way is like bad,
and that's why we center all these conversations around like, this is why trans women stories are put forward more, because society still kind of views them as men, and there's this weird fucked up thing where like, and therefore their stories are more important thing. There's all of this gross, horrible shit going on with which conversations we have, which identities get highlighted in which ways, and it's all built out of, it's all symptomatic of these broader structural things in our society. It's fucked. So yes, I'm sorry, big rant on that one, but
no,
yeah.
but like, yes.
And like, yeah, I want to, like, I have the thing where like all the people I want to fuck are the people I would want to be as well, and it's really sad and upsetting. Like, it's really fraught for me. I am attracted to all of to that band, which I'm not gonna be like, as much as I try to break that down, like, it's true, I am. And so, and like, and I want to be in that band, and it's messed up. Yep. It's really fucked. Yeah, I don't know.
Yep, that's I feel that. I feel that. Okay, what else did Dave said something a little bit back there that I tried to read while we were talking, but I was too engrossed in the conversation.
It was a very long question.
Basically, I'm always like deeply jealous and envious of the people I am getting down with, and it's weird. I just like want to be them, but also want to.
It's the James Bond thing, except you want to be them and you want to fuck them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a repost here. Someone no strong attachment to their assigned gender aside from a fairly casual disdain of the things that represent societally. You think it is good practice or allyship towards people who are more invested in dismantling the binary or supporting those who struggle with it to reject a gender?
So this is like, there's a little bit of, there are some notes of this in my choices where like, me saying, you know, I am non-binary, my pronouns are they, them, is also a political stance. As like Ashley and Elf, like embodying their identity is a political stance. And in the sense too that like it is taken as being an argument. It is combative. It is pushing back against a bunch of bullshit. So like, yes, that can totally be helpful. Even like, you don't have to like ascribe to the identity to start dismantling, to like a, you know, a marginalized identity, to start dismantling the means of marginalization. And so if you like, you don't have to be like, cool, I'm non-binary too, my pronouns are they, them now, etc. You can just be like, yo, what's up, I'm Dave, he, him pronouns. All like every time you introduce yourself to everyone, right? That thing we were talking about earlier of taking on some of the work of dismantling the bullshit is a great way to participate in and help support and buttress other people's identity with your work. And you can do that while being a cisgendered, like straight identifying person. Yeah. That's fine. It's fine for you to help that out.
Excuse me. Yes, exactly that. I have nothing further to add. Andrew is very Andrew
I'm sorry, I laughed in the middle of that.
I think about gender stuff a lot. I don't know, like I don't.
I mean, I get it. I totally understand having that. That particular leaning, so to speak. What else we got? Friends.
And also, yeah, Dave and everyone in chat generally, very good questions.
July says, in my opinion, gender doesn't exist. You are who you are, and how you were born has nothing to do with it. Do you feel this is true?
I mean, I hesitate to, like, I don't know. I've been making some somewhat reductive statements, and like this kind of feels like one in some ways.
I mean, to just like take that on myself a little bit here.
Yeah.
I vehemently disagree with it. Gender is like a thing that our society cares about way too much for it not to exist.
Well, like, so yeah, like I think there's an important distinction to draw between something being arbitrary and something not existing.
I mean,
like, gender is completely arbitrary. It's made up, but it is a useful fiction sometimes, or an exciting.
Adam put it exactly the way that makes sense. Gender is a construct, but so are the buildings we live in. You know?
So like, it doesn't have to exist, but it does. And engaging with it can be productive and feel good. I acknowledge that there's a portion of people for whom like gender is just a bunch of problems for them. Like it doesn't actually give them anything of value. And so yeah, having more room culturally for people to like have an out category, which like that's kind of what I'm choosing in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, like yes and no. I think it is bullshit, but it is something we're going to engage in to varying degrees.
I guess the thing is, like, just because it exists, it doesn't make it good necessarily. But
it doesn't have any inherent.
You're asking about its existence, not about whether it's good or not, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that it definitely exists, which you know, I can say from a position of a person who cares very deeply about how they present themselves. You know what I mean? I'm not saying like, you know, fuck non-binary people or anything. Like gender is the thing. I just like
clearly it has value. Clearly this thing has value, and for you there's a specific set of gender stuff that you want and that has value for you. Yes. Also, that's a big ass coffee. Holy shit! I just noticed.
I'm just
as tall as your head.
I'm just a small person.
Oh god.
No, but you.
It's true. You could.
You really could. I wasn't gonna say it.
Right. I mean,
as Tom points out, only with their consent.
Have and will, I'm sure. What?
That was such a good aside. I'm all for it. Do we have maybe like one more question?
Yeah, just one more short question here. Just Andrew, did you consider any other pronouns, such as I don't know how to pronounce any of these other pronouns, so I'm asking you.
Yeah, like I don't know. For me, the big range of other pronouns in English, I'm kind of just like because of how I feel about language, I'm just like, cool, I'm gonna use the most commonly used one because it's language, and the thing that is most important for me is that I be understood. And so that was why I made the choice that I made. If you're excited about these other linguistic like to me that's less about gender stuff and more about linguistics, whether or not we're going to have like a different set of pronouns, etc. English already had some neutral pronouns in it. It has they and them, which have been in use as a singular since like Shakespearean times. If we want to go down that road of like justifying the grammatical or linguistic stuff of it, it's like it's been around for fucking ever. People use it all the time without thinking, and then as soon as you couple it with gender identity stuff, people react
bent out of shape
in a really toxic way to it because again it is chipping at patriarchal structures and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's something I don't like to dwell on.
Chipping at the idea of that male default, right? Like that.
Indeed.
That, like masculine default.
I think I sometimes have trouble with them because I've never encountered them in real life or in like video or audio. I've only ever seen them written down, and I'm like, I don't know how to say that.
Well, and like language is a living thing, and it's really difficult to arbitrarily insert new words into language. Generally, my feeling around language is just that like we use what bubbles up, and what gets used is what we use, and it's like about that feedback loop and stuff like that. So like that is why I have taken the ones that I've chose.
Yeah.
To answer your question, finally at long last. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I think that's going to be it for this evening. Thanks everyone for watching. Shall we do some shout outs?
Yes, let's start with our lovely guest. Andrew, tell us where we can find you and what you do and stuff. All the shout out things. Go.
So I'm Andrew, and you can find me on Twitter at Comedian Crow, and what I do there is rail against the patriarchy and all the other bullshit in the world. I'm kind of like a quietly seething engine of political dissent, You can also follow me on twitch.tv/actualfactual. I designed a game called Girl by Moonlight, or I'm in the process of designing a game called Girl by Moonlight, and you can check that out. It's about tragic magical girls. You can watch me on various Twitch places playing role-playing games, often with a lot of transes and other queers, because fuck yeah.
Cool. Elf, do you wanna do your shout outs?
Sure. I'll do mine next. Hi, I'm Distracted Elf. We've done this a couple of times. You can find me at twitch.tv/distractedelf or on Twitter at distractedelf, where I am streaming things probably. Go ahead, Ash.
Cool. Hi everyone. I'm Ashley Nova. This is my channel. Thanks everyone for coming out and watching. If you want to see more of me, you can follow me here by clicking the little heart button up top. Or you can follow me on Twitter at Ashley_Nova_, where you can see me generally just bitching about my life.
It's good.
Yeah.
That's what the people want.
Cool. Thanks everyone. We're gonna go. Bye.